Without further ado, I'll hand over to you, Julia. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. Can you see my screen okay?
Yes, yeah, all good. Thank
Apologies,
you.
I am battling a cold today, so I will sorry I sound a bit weird. Um Today I want to talk to you about SAM as a service and how we've transformed our team from a traditional SAM function into what we are calling SAM as a service. Um, uh, I have been in the industry for a very long time, like Stuart. Um, I have worked at various corporations. I've never worked for a vendor. I've always worked in end user organizations.
No, fun.
And it's important to note when I first started at Vodafone, Vodafone was very much an area where if we had an audit, we kind of reacted to it, and then everything disappeared again for a while, and then we'd react, and it would all um, kick off. Around about 6 years ago, I found myself as the only SAM person within Vodafone. So Vodafone had gone up to teams to 4 or 5, and then gone back to 1, and then gone up again because it didn't really have a strategic solution for SAM. And at that point, we had a bit of an audit, a problem, and we had a change of CIO, and the decision was made that we would start taking this a little bit more seriously. And we would then build that team. And the team was predominantly based in the UK, because I'm based in the UK. But today, so 6 years later, we are 32. We are based in 7 countries. We speak 12 languages, and we have onboarded 6 service recipients, countries, entities, whatever you want to call them. They all belong to Vodafone, onto our SAM as a service. And it's important to note that one of the things that we've done very differently, and listening to what Stuart's got to say, is that a lot of these people are in-house people that we are now building a career journey within IT asset management. The skill shortage has meant that we can't get the skills we need, but also sometimes when you look for skilled people, they don't always want to do some of the more handle churning activities that might be required when you start to build a end-to-end SAM team. So we have a mixture of very skilled people, but we also have people that have come from the service desk type roles and are building their journey in software asset management. So where we were focusing on probably the top 5, a few things. Bear in mind there was only one of me at one point. We weren't really defining any activities. So I was running around doing whatever the manager wanted me to do. So I need you to look at this, and then I need you to look at that. And then we've got this project going on. And it was really a number counting game. How many have we got of this? How much do we match of that? We've then moved up the scale, and I've got this scale that says we started to sort of react to more situations, defining the process as the team gets bigger. And then we looked at the capability that we could do. So could we do other things that were more SAM related rather than just the big 5? And then we started to engage with more stakeholders. So who else was important to us as a SAM team? How do we make sure that we connect to other stakeholders in the organization? And how do we make sure that we can proactively understand what do they need from us? So that might be internal audit teams, things like ISO. It might be our procurement and supply chain people, certainly our security. And we started to move to a more of a risk quantified base approach where we can say these are the problems that we've got, rather than just running around like headless chickens when it happens. And today, where we are today, is we now have a portfolio of activities. So we haven't agreed this is what we do. We have a cost for that service schedule, and I'll go on to explain more that. And as Stuart said, the focus is on value. It's moved from a numbers game, and we still do cost. Don't get me wrong; it's always about money, but it's about business value, and it's about how do we make sure that we're giving the right value to our customers and not making the assumptions that everybody wants the same thing. So what is SAM as a service? What it means is we've changed it so that whilst we are kind of salaried employees, we are now working as an MSP within our own organization. So we still work for Vodafone. I work for Vodafone Voice now, which is the shared services arm of Vodafone. But what it means is I have a service schedule between me and the service recipient that decides to use my SAM services, which has a list of activities. They know what we're doing. They define which assets we want to look after. And we define how many hours we're going to work, and also if there's any exception processes on that. For that service schedule is a cost. So we define what the unit price of the cost would be. And we have a discussion with the customer that says, this is what you're going to pay us annually for the service that we provide. Here's the terms of engagement on both sides. And here is the contract renewal and notice period. So a customer can change some of the terms and conditions with us, but they must give us notice period on what they're going to do. And like these always things, there are exceptions for things that crop up that you're not expecting. With that comes a set of defined SLAs and KPIs. So the customer knows what they're getting from us, how they're going to get it. And again, we set these annually and we report on them monthly. So we have moved to much more of a ticket-based system. So if you can imagine, if you're internally in your own organization, generally what happens is you might get a ticket, but you also might get a phone call, and then you might get a Teams, and you might get an email. We have to make sure everything is tracked and recorded because we are effectively a third party within our own organization. So a lot of that happens. And we have service reviews with our customers to make sure that we understand if things are starting to go off track in terms of what they're expecting. What that means for the customer is that there's a known value output. So we have dashboards that we declare everything we're doing. We have lots of registers. So we have a CSI register and a risk register. There's a regular service review with our stakeholder customer. And there's a lot of focus on return on investment. Obviously, they're paying us for a service. We need to make sure that they feel that they're getting value for money and return on investment on that cost. So what does that mean in terms of how we have changed as a team? So what it means is that because you have a scope and you know what you're doing, someone isn't going to come up to you like in the old days and your manager go, I need you to go and turn left when you were working right. You have to then have a conversation about things that we're going to do differently. So all of a sudden I can't get curveballs sent to me, but also that means they need to be more planned. So if there's going to be an upgrade to the next Windows version, we have to be part of that conversation. We need to know in advance. We need to know how we're going to get involved in it and whether there's any change to the cost. And that means for us, there's no ambiguity, either for us or them. They know what we're delivering, we know what they're delivering, and we also know in what timescales we're delivering those pieces of work. There's lots of formal reporting requirements. My team would probably argue that that's probably the downside to this is the admin has increased because whereas you might have done something on a chat or whatever, you now have to record everything, but it does mean the customer gets that formal reporting from them. The other really important thing is that resourcing is in our power. So the biggest conversation I have with people when I go to conferences and events is, how do I turn myself from one of one, like you did, into one of two, or one of three, or one of four? It's a really hard thing. And for the years that I was in Vodafone, where I was one of one and then one of four, back to one of one, back of one of six, it becomes really difficult because you're not necessarily seen as an important service until that audit comes in, and then all of a sudden they need you to run around, and then they kind of go, everything's okay now, so we don't need you guys. In the managed service model, because they're paying us a service, it means that we can decide from the service cost that we're getting in how many people we need, what skills we need, where we need those skills, and where we need to train. So that becomes our power and our decision-making process. And as you can imagine, sometimes there's growth and sometimes there's reduction. So it becomes an overhead on us, but it does mean that we can make some decisions about whether we're shifting work left down to less skilled resources in order to free up other resources. And because training is in our power, we are able to kind of focus on how do we make sure that people who used to work on the service desk can now help out in different ways enough to meet our service. We do have an end-to-end governance on our delivery, so that makes sure that we know, we record everything we do. We use ADO for this, and we make sure that we understand what are we delivering, how we're delivering it, and we govern that end-to-end process of projects to make sure that the customer is happy. And the last thing, obviously, is this has opened opportunities outside SAM. So we don't just do licensing anymore. We look after PC rights. We work with security on vulnerabilities and deny list. We are working on ISO audits. We look at right to do business audits. We work on upgrades and projects. We get involved in cloud activities, on data analytics, data quality issues, because we use the strength of the skilled data analysts we sing and talk about what we do and how we can help, and we can build those relationships with other people. Now, a lot of these opportunities come with the cost model, but the reality is quite often we then become that service provider for something that is intrinsically linked to SAM, but might not necessarily be seen as a pure SAM job. Apologies. So what are the benefits for the customer, as opposed to having just us as, or me and a few others as single resources? For them, budgeting is huge. They know how much it's going to cost. It's very transparent. Our unit price is very transparent. They don't have to worry about pay rises and sort of annual reviews and people surveys and all those things, because that's all in with us. So they get a transparent unit price. There is a review cycle of that. They have levers. So we will tell them what their unit price is, but there is always a way for them to, if they work in a different way, they can reduce their price. So for example, if we come back and say to them, you've got 5,000 servers sitting around doing nothing, and it's got a license on it, we use Snow, but it's got Snow licenses on it, and it's got other products on, but no one's using it, that is a lever for them to remove costs. We can't do that for them because we're a service provider and someone else looks after the servers. So we provide them lots of information that says, you could save money if you did this, you could save money. We do all their license compliance for them and their individual licensing, but we can't make any hardware changes for them. And we can't make any infrastructure changes. So we will provide them lots of things that says you could save money. And some of that will intrinsically link to the service to us. And some of it will just be about either hardware or software costs that they can save money. We also manage any exceptions. So we have a process if they want us to do something weird and wonderful that isn't in our current service schedule, a bit like any other managed service, there is a way for us to manage that as an exception under a cost. And sometimes we do it for free because we're able to do it and we're able to provide that as a value add because we want to keep their service and because we want to keep them. We do all their licensing and compliance for them. So we have approved, denied software catalogs. This is something that didn't exist when I first started Vodafone. We target review schedules on certain software. Unlike other managed service providers, because we're an in-house managed service provider, we have to look after 3,000 applications and not just 5, but we make sure that we understand the tiering of those and work with them on how often we're going to look at them, or are we even going to look at them at all. And the other thing that's quite key, because we're working with all Vodafone entities today, even though they're separate entities with their own, they're separate legal entities, we are able to look at licensed trade opportunities, which is a key benefit to them. So if there is one country that no longer needs 50 Visio, but another country wants to buy 50 Visio, we can do an internal trade without having to go to the vendor, which allows us to do allows us to make use of things that are no longer being used and offer them to other people. Similarly, we are able to chunk up our licensing deals because we can look at where we had traditional licensing deals in every country, which exists, and it still exists today, where we can go, did you know you've all got a contract with XYZ? Did you know you're all paying tier 1 pricing? If we move them all together, we might be able to get a really high discount because we're pulling our power together of purchasing and buying. The customers get a very much transparent position of where they are. So again, I talked about the fact that we use a lot of reporting. So they know where their risks are from a risk register. Everything is, we tend to use the ITAM kind of structure for risk registers to make sure everything is categorized and gets a value. So everybody knows what their risk registers are. We have a CSI register, which comes from both them, from the service reviews. We'd like you to look at that, but also from ourselves. We are constantly looking at how we could do things cheaper, quicker, faster, using more automation. As Stuart mentioned, obviously AI is starting to come into that. They know which ones we are worried about from an audit defense. We highlight to them when we know that other companies are being audited, who's out and about, how do you relay to that. So if you've got vendor A is out looking at auditing, we can go back to them and say, well, these guys are auditing our competitors, however, you're okay. And then we do something called a liability ledger. A liability ledger is where you are liable to get yourselves in a mess if someone comes in and audits you. So we track all of that and we put a unit value on that. So if we've got things that are very old, or we're holding on to for a small period of time, then someone wants to switch off, we might say to them, you know, you can renew these licenses or hold on to them. If you renew them, you're only going to use it for 6 months, so you might be wasting the money. But if you don't renew them, then you've got a liability. If you don't get rid of that project on time, or someone comes in and audit, you've got a problem. So we are very transparent with what's going on so that the customer can make the decisions. And then we manage all of our stakeholders. We make sure that all our objectives are business aligned. So what is the business trying to do this year? It's always money, right? Money is everybody. But there's also things like maybe upgrades, maybe rollouts, maybe mergers and acquisitions. Maybe there's a focus on, in our organization, there's a massive focus on policy compliance and policy collaboration and reduction this year. How can we support that? We're very much collaborative approach with all our stakeholders. We do have OLAs between most of our stakeholders to say, this is what we'll do for you and you'll do for us. Not necessarily under commercial, but more of a relationship agreement. And we're always exploring new business to see what else we can do. Some of the challenges we faced, as you can imagine, when you're starting to build a global team, and we are in 7 countries, the cultural differences between everybody. When I worked for the UK, all my customers were UK people, and I was born here, and I've always understand the UK. But when you're trying to offer a service to, and we've got 7 countries at the moment, the cultural differences between each countries becomes a factor in working out how do you make sure that your service is fit for purpose for everybody. Whilst we are trying to have 80% one size fits all, so everybody raises a ticket, for example, in Remedy, you have to make sure that there are the differences between how people interact and how people want their work delivered to them. You have to make sure we factor that in. And this is one of the reasons why we've made sure that we have local language speakers. So some of the countries have a local language speaker on site. And in some cases, we have language speakers in our shared service centres, but we make sure that we have someone who speaks the language aligned to every service that we provide. So that means if we need to, so they need to go into a different language, they can do, and we can understand how that works. And the customers find that hugely beneficial. There is also, when you're trying to provide an efficient shared service across multiple countries, conflicting priorities. I don't have, whilst I've got 32 people, I don't have necessarily 2 on one country and 2 on another country. We provide a lot of our services across, whilst we do have individuals assigned to certain countries, a lot of our services go across. And sometimes we find that there are conflicting priorities between different markets who want us to work on different projects at the same time. And we have to work through those priorities to make sure that we are delivering the underlying service that we've said that we're going to do, but also work through the different priorities of the countries that we're working with. And the more countries we onboard, the more the priorities change. Vodafone as a whole is trying to make sure that we do things similarly at the same time and move to strategic tools. But always when you go into a new country, there is a tool that you've never heard of, or it's specifically used for something that isn't therefore used in another country. We've had quite a lot of resistance to change, not necessarily from the stakeholders that buy our services and the SPOCs that we deal with, but the end users. So, you know, if you're asking an end user who has always phoned someone up, walked around to someone's desk, or sent them a Teams to suddenly use Ticket, it becomes onerous for them and they find it difficult. And there's always ways of trying to go around to get around the ways we do it. We've also had to lock down things at the desk, the web, at the internet. So we're working with security on things like Forcepoint so that we can start to understand things like SaaS and what we're doing. We now have an approved and denied software catalog, and we work with security on deny list. And a lot of countries and a lot of people have got away with using whatever they want to do for many, many years, either unlicensed or unauthorized or in a unauthorized configuration. So when a team like us comes in and we try and create some standardized and simplification methodologies, it always causes some sort of resistance and reaction. And we worked really hard with the local service owners for them to communicate in their organization so that we don't always come across as the bad guys, that the decision has been made by the CIO and the senior leaders. It's not us. And actually, it's of benefit to them longer term that everything gets recorded, so we don't miss any things out, but also to make sure that we're not getting subject to audit issues and fines, and we are controlling our costs, which is obviously the biggest benefit to the market. And then the other thing is the unrealistic expectations that sometimes they have on us. I think sometimes when we roll out to a market who have never had software asset management before, and they are in the middle of a giant audit, and you go in and you look after that audit and you sort that out, they immediately assume that within 3 months you can sort out all of their problems. We provide something called a baseline diagram. We always do that when we first go in and explain the landscape of their environment, from things that we don't know about, things that are approved, things that are denied, the end of life situation, maybe some shadow IT. So we give them this kind of diagram, and then they look at you and go, can you fix all that within 3 months? And it's like, no, this is a 2-year program to fix your problem. So we do have those unrealistic expectations, but as we do more markets and we become a larger team, we are able to hit some of the repeating problems quicker. And obviously, and as we look at bringing licenses together, we can start to tackle some of those problems in a much quicker way, and much more realistic expectation for our customer. So in summary, how does our new world work? So we are a managed service provider within our own organization. We're all still Vodafone employees. We're all still salaried and have the same, everything's the same as in the Vodafone, except that we are seen as a managed service provider. So everything has become slightly more formal, but it also benefits both us and the customer. Our opportunities are expanding. As I said, we are seen as a key team for data analytics, key team for accurate data source, excuse me, and accurate data quality, and our successes we talk about whether that's on our internal Facebook pages, and we share about it, what we do. We also go in for industry awards, and we speak at events because we want to be seen as a challenging partner to other managed service providers. It is worth saying that because we are now a managed service provider, we can be RFP'd against other managed service providers. So as Stuart said, there are lots of other managed service providers out there. So we have to make sure that we are the only choice internally for Vodafone, and that we don't get replaced with one of our peers. So that whilst we have an opportunity, we also have to make sure that we are constantly adding value. We're trying to build ourselves as a trusted partner. As I said, if you trust us, as you probably have in your organization, there are probably trusted third parties that you work with, people that have been around for years, that have always worked with you. We want to turn into that trusted partner with Vodafone, even though we're inside our own organization, is that we are trusted to do that, and therefore we won't necessarily be put up against our peers and competitors. And actually, if we are, we come out comparable and better than our partners can be. We are looking more at automation efficiency. I guess the advantage of being internally is that because we can be close to the business and we can be close to other teams that are working, and we sit in the same areas: change, problem, incident. We near ops. We are with IT for IT. We are aware of the strategic products and the strategic programs that are going on. We can look at how can we work with others to create automation, and how can we do more to be more efficient and work with some of the other vendors. So our data is not just ours. We share our data with some of the other tooling, and some of that tooling is then used to show data in data lakes from various toolings to make the customers get that business value from their data by taking it from different sources in the back end, because we're part of that ecosystem with all those other IT teams. And as I said, we focus on value. 100% is all about value and results. What are the outcomes? What are the value? What do you want us to do? How do you want us to show you what we're doing? How would you like us to get involved? How would it help you meet your business value and your outcomes if we could provide that information for you? And as I said, it used to be all about compliance, 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 counting numbers, saving money. And money and compliance is still important, but it's now about data quality, how you can use that information, how I might be able to use those analytics, how I might be able to use my information and my team and my skills to help you deliver what you want to do. And it's not always software asset management as you would see it. So thank you. I couldn't see the chat, so I will move over and hopefully answer some questions.
Yeah, thank you very much, Julia. That's really excellent. Yeah, there are a couple specifically for you there. How do you deal with audits from companies who want to audit the whole of Vodafone, but your service isn't being used in some locations? That was one there. And in your experience, what are the best ways to educate the rest of the business about what your service does? In many cases, I find the lack of education in the wider IT world about why we need to do these things is a blocker to progress.
So let me take the audit question first. It happens. We do get global audits where they want to do other markets. We provide as much help as we can. But most of the time there is a lack of visibility in those areas. So most of the time those people have maybe not got a tool, or they've got a different tool. We do get involved in the negotiation stages with from an audit defense perspective. So one of the first things we do is try and back the audit off anyway, and try and work on those techniques. How do we stop the audit coming in? How do we limit the audit to what we know? And how do we work with the procurement teams to make sure that they don't get free rein? So now we exist, we kind of get involved in audits even if we're not. We get involved in the data gathering where we can, but sometimes it doesn't work in that market's favor. But I can tell you the springboard effect generally is that they will then onboard to our service or look to us for more help, or work with us, because they then realize that it is better to be part of a protected team and be in with the SAM as a service than to be out of the other end. So that's the first thing. Sorry, the second question was, Mark, apologies.
How you educate the rest of the business about why they need you.
So we have a newsletter that goes on all our. So we have an internal system. So we use Viva Engage now, actually now. So we have Viva Engage. We have our newsletter that goes out. We focus on what's going on in the business rather than necessarily SAM stuff. So we focus on Microsoft is auditing. We often use the news stories that whichever country's company might have been audited and found fines. We do demos with other countries. We involve ourselves. I am my boss calls me a bit of a professional pain in the ass. I will go to meetings. I will get myself invited to CIO meetings. I get team members invited. So I will speak to senior members of staff and saying, have you thought about this? I will go to meetings. I will present to people, whether that's security, whether that's other areas. So we are always talking about what we do. We are always sharing. Our dashboards are very open to all the customers that are on. And my CIO will share what we do. So we do have C-suite backing. So they will also share it in their end of year results. There is always a SAM item on the agenda to talk about software as asset management as a service. And my colleagues in BRM, business relationship management, they will talk to their stakeholders in other countries to say, why aren't you doing anything about this? So we talk a lot, we get involved a lot, but you have to, and we share our success, but you have to keep that conversation and communication going.
Fabulous, thank you. A couple more coming through. Does Vodafone also have HAMAS, hardware asset management as a service, I guess? And one there on assumptions about stakeholders. You said don't make assumptions. Can you share how you approach this, I guess, as you have a lot of different stakeholders in a big organization?
So we don't do hardware asset management as a service because each country has to. We used to do hardware asset management when I worked in the UK, but when we moved to the global group, we have to treat ourselves as if we are globally centralated, like on an island. So I can't go and stock control Italy, and I can't go and stock control Spain. I can't go into these countries and do some of that work. And pure hardware asset management has more to it than we can provide. So currently hardware asset management is provided locally within each market. We provide some governance processes for them on what we expect them to do. And we also work with them on assets that we can see that aren't being used and they need to do something about it. So we provide governance and we work with them, but we can't order laptops. I can't build laptops. I can't process laptops because I'm not physically able to do that in every market. And the hardware asset management processes in Vodafone are much more intrinsically linked to PC support as well, rather than what we do is software asset management. So they are different, but we are linked to them. In terms of stakeholders, one of the assumptions we made was about what we think they need from us and we need from them. And I think that's where the assumptions you need to change. You need to properly sit down with your stakeholders and have a conversation. The other thing is that there is always an assumption of what they think you can do for them. And the reality is you can do a lot more for them than they think you can do for them, especially with procurement, because I think they thought all we did was count stuff. And they've now realized that we can predict, we can trend, we can create graphs, we can do usage stats, we can look at who's doing what. I think so. The more that you can talk about what you can deliver for them and how they can work with you. Cyber, for example, we now do all their vulnerability scanning through our tooling now. So they provide us the list of all the scans, and we can then provide a graph on who's got what, and we work with them on making sure things are removed. So the assumption is often both ways about who can do what and what you can do for them. And don't assume. Go and talk, go and have conversations, and then really find out how you can create them value.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thanks very much, Julia.
You're
I know
totally
you.
welcome.